Hey, let's get into it. During a quiet evening, Jen won't let me turn on or start watching a movie that's already started. When we turn it on halfway through, it can be hard to understand what's happening. You miss a lot of the major plot points. You might see the characters, you hear the dialogue, you can watch some of the conflict, but you don't actually know everything that's led up to that moment. You don't know what's already been promised and what's been lost or what the story has been building towards. And it's only if somebody later in the show explains, those earlier scenes that everything maybe starts to make sense. But that moment that you turn on a movie, that moment is not a random event. It's part of a larger story. And that's what Peter wants us to understand about the gospel. So we pick up the book of Peter here, the letter of 1 Peter in chapter 1, verse 10. Concerning this salvation, the prophets who prophesied about the grace that was to be yours searched and inquired carefully, inquiring what person or time the Spirit of Christ in them was indicating when he predicted the sufferings of Christ and the subsequent glories. It was revealed to them that they were serving not themselves, but you, in the things that have now been announced to you through those who preach the good news to you by the Holy Spirit, sent from heaven, things into which angels longed to look. Peter says that salvation, the salvation that we have received, isn't something that God made up kind of in the last minute. The prophets of the Old Testament, they searched, they inquired carefully about this plan of salvation. And for generations, God had been speaking through his prophets about grace, the grace that was still to come. And they saw pieces of it. They spoke about suffering and glory, and it pointed forward towards the work of the Messiah. But they didn't get to see that full picture. They were like people standing before sunrise, seeing maybe the first glimpse of light on the horizon, knowing that the day is obviously coming, but not seeing the sun fully rise. Um, Peter says they were trying to understand really who the Messiah was going to be and what that was going to mean for the people. And that means the Old Testament was always moving somewhere. The promises, the sacrifices, the laws, the kings, the prophets, from the exile to the longing for rescue, all of it was pointing to Jesus. And Peter says those things have been announced to us through the good news, through the gospel in the New Testament. And that means when we hear about Jesus, we're not hearing this new religious idea. We're hearing the focal point of God's great story. The suffering of Jesus wasn't an accident. The resurrection isn't like a surprise ending. God was bringing his promises to fulfillment. And the amazing part is that we, as the church, are included in that great story. Peter here is writing to just really ordinary Christians. They're scattered all over different places. Many of them are suffering. They're maybe feeling out of place. And he's wanting to remind them that their faith is connected to something much bigger than their present circumstances. The prophets looked ahead to this grace that they are experiencing. The apostles announced it. The Holy Spirit is carrying it forward. And even the angels were longing to look into the things that we now experience. And that should change the way that we see our lives. Our faith isn't just about getting through today. Our church, our families, our prayer, our witness, just quiet faithfulness, all of it belongs inside of this giant epic story that God has been writing for centuries upon centuries. And sometimes when life feels ordinary, remember that you're part of something eternal. When your faith feels hard, remember that God is preparing this hope long before you ever needed it. And when you feel small, remember the gospel that we have received is something the prophets, they long to understand and angels long to look into. And you're not living in a random moment. We are living in the fulfillment of God's Old Testament promises. And the same God who carried the story through all of those generations, from Moses and Gideon and Jonah, he's still carrying that on through our lives today. Wherever you find yourself, God goes with you today.